I recently had the opportunity to collaborate and work with Tampa artist Pusha Preme to create an AfroBeats song. The song is called Fatima by Pusha Preme and myself, and it is available now on all streaming platforms, but in this video I want to break down the production. Before we get started, if you're a Studio One user, don't forget to download my free productivity toolbar. This is basically a macro toolbar for your arrange view that combines a bunch of production functions into time-saving one-click buttons. The productivity toolbar is completely free, so if you want to start speeding up your Studio One workflow today, then click the first link down below. Okay, so much like with reggaeton, Afrobeats have a very pronounced and distinctive rhythm, so getting the drums right were absolutely essential. With that being said, I started out with a basic 3-part drum section consisting of a kick, a close hi-hat, and a snare, and that sounds like this. Now, if you want to recreate this pattern by yourself, it's actually not that hard, so let me show you. Now, what you want to do is first start off with your snare. I find this is the easiest thing to go off of, and the first thing you want to do is set your grid to 16th notes. Now, the next thing you want to do here is program a note on the tick right before count number 2, so right here. So depending on where you're at, it could be 4, it could be 5, it doesn't matter. Just go ahead and go to the second beat. It'll be 9.2 in my case, and go back 1, and this is where you want to program a note. Now, while on a 16th note grid, if you program a note, you're going to program a 16th note, right? However, what we want is an 8th note. So go ahead and just extend it so it covers up 2 spaces. From here, with the note selected, go ahead and hit Shift D to duplicate that note, and then go ahead and move it over 1 tick. With that second note selected, hit Shift D again, and this time move it over 2 ticks. And last but not least, with the third note selected, hit Shift D again, and you basically have your snare pattern. Now, if you want an even faster way of doing this, I just added this exact snare pattern to my Beatmakers toolbar for the piano roll. So then if you go over to the snares and claps category, drop this down, it'll be under snare Afrobeats or clap Afrobeats in the impact submenu, or the snare clap Afrobeats in the sample one menu. In any case, once you click this, depending on what you're using, you will get this exact snare pattern. The Beatmakers toolbar is a paid toolbar, but like with any other update, this is completely free. So if you already own it, then just go ahead and download the new version. And if you don't own this toolbar yet, then I'll make sure to link it down below. Now from here, go ahead and move on down to a close hi-hat. And here you want to program 8th notes. And again, I'm going to be using my Beatmakers toolbar. So hats, I'm using sample 1, and then 8th notes. Now, once you're at this point, it's up to you as to how you want to finesse your hi-hats, but what I basically did is I went to the end of the 2nd measure and end of the 4th measure, and I added some rolls to create some variety. So let me show you that in real time. I actually added some 64th note rolls, so to make this easy, go ahead and change the grid to 64th. Then I'm going to go to the last beat of the 2nd measure, so right here. I'm going to shorten this note down to a 64th note and duplicate this 3 times, so 1, 2, 3. Take the 2nd note, do the same thing, shorten it down, and then 1, 2, 3. Then take that 2nd cluster, and I moved it down to an A. Now, I didn't want this to get repetitive, so what I did for the last beat of the 4th measure is I basically took this exact same structure, so 64th note rolls. Let me go ahead and copy this over. And what I did was I took that 2nd cluster, and this time, instead of moving it down, I moved it up, and in this case, it was a C sharp. Moving on to the kick, for this one, you want to basically program a 4 to the floor pattern, which is basically a kick drum on every major count. So let me go ahead and do this for you in real time. And the first thing I want to do here is change this back over to a 16th note grid. So let's go ahead and program that kick. And as mentioned, you want it on every major count. So once you have it looking like this, go ahead and just press Shift D to kind of fill this out. From here, you're going to take the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th kick of the 1st measure and the 2nd kick of the 2nd measure, delete them. And then go ahead and select your kicks and just press Shift D to duplicate that again. And you basically have the same pattern that we started with. Now this here is a very basic but very effective Afrobeats drum pattern. Now, we could leave it the way it is, but in my opinion, this is a bit boring. I've said this a couple of different times, but to spice up your drums, you want to add some percussive material. So then, the first thing that I did here was I added a shaker, which had a very monotonous, very repetitive pattern that was aimed at complementing the close hi-hat while adding a little bit of texture, and that sounds like this. From there, I added a 2nd shaker with a more chugging feel to add even more movement to this beat, and together they sound like this. Now to finish off this first round of drums, the next thing that I added was an open hi-hat in between the last count of the measure. And then last but not least, I added a clave, which is a wooden instrument, and I played the exact same pattern as the snare, with the only exception being that I added one more note in the very, very beginning. So all of this now sounds like this. So that was the drums, but from here we moved on up to the melodic section. So let's go ahead and take a look. Now in terms of melody, this was super simple. We're basically in the key of C, and I programmed this synth, which was already modulated. It came like this. Now to layer this synth and make it sound a little bit more full, what I did was I added a pad, exact same chords, just a different texture kind of to provide a little bit of a bed for that synth to sit on top of. And then last but not least, I duplicated that one more time and I added this to a synth stab. And I basically took the chords, shortened them down to 16th notes and only added them at the very beginning. Now, much like with the drums, there's always little things you can do to make it a little bit more interesting. So from here, we moved on up to some vocal chops. Now, the vocal chop that I got here, I got from Arcade. So I basically just programmed something, chopped it up, and it sounds like this. This is without any effects at first. And what I basically did was I added a little bit of an EQ to filter it out. Then I added this little plugin called Murda Melodies, which I believe is actually from Murda Beats. This comes in the Slate All Access bundle, and it has a bunch of different effects. It's basically a multi-effect kind of unit, and it sounds like this now. Now, although this sounded really cool, it kind of accentuated some frequencies in areas that I did not like. So I went ahead and I added a second EQ to kind of tame those frequencies. So I'll shift this back and forth so you can notice what's happening here. And last but not least, I added a delay to kind of just help it fill in a little bit better. Now, if you take a look here on the main vocal chop, there is a bit of a gap that I wanted to fill in with something different to create some variety. Now, to do that, I basically brought in a second vocal chop and a little guitar lick that I recorded, and together these two with the main vocal chop sounds like this. And if we combine the synths and pads from before. Now, the very last section in this main hook area was a bass. Now, this one was a bit of a tough decision because initially I wanted to use a bass guitar, and I did record a part and it sounds like this. Now, in the end, Preme and I decided to use a Moog bass instead with a more simple pattern. And this is basically following the chord progression from before. Now, for the arrangement, we basically started out with a 8-bar intro, and for this we had the synth and the synth stab. Halfway through this intro, we brought in the clave. And then what I did was, for the beginning of the hook, I added this big airy crash that I like to use a lot, and I reversed that to create a bit of a riser, and I added a little bit of a drum fill. So then the transition from the intro to the hook sounds like this. As for the verse and pre-chorus, I took a bunch of those melodic sections from the hook and I removed a bunch of elements to create a more sparse, more kind of subtle arrangement. So then if we take a look, I removed both of the vocal chops from the chorus, I removed the synth stab, and I removed the electric guitar lick. So then what was left was the synth, the pad, and if you take a look here, I did mention that there was a gap in the first vocal chop. Right here, I basically took this section and I brought it over in the middle. I thought it was a little bit too busy, too much for the hook, but it fit just perfect for the verse. So the verse sounds like this. Now, as for the pre-chorus, I used a very common technique of removing the kick drum to create a little bit of contrast, and then to accentuate that even more, I removed some of the drum elements off the last measure to create, again, some dynamic shift. And basically that consisted of removing all of the drums and bringing back that riser and then that drum fill. So this is what that sounds like. So that in essence was the production for Fatima done by yours truly. Now, if you're an artist or even a producer looking to do something like this where you collaborate with an artist and you want to release your own music, then consider doing so with today's video sponsor, DistroKid. DistroKid is a music distributor and hands down the most affordable at only $23 a year for unlimited releases. On top of distribution, they are always adding new stuff to your subscription for free, like their newly added mobile app for iOS. With this app, you can now upload your music, check your stats and earnings, edit your lyrics, and so much more, and all straight from your phone, so it has never been easier to release your music. The app is now available, and although it is only currently for iOS, they are working on an Android version. In any case, I'll make sure to leave the app and a DistroKid discount for 7% off your first year link down below so that you can start managing your music releases on the go. Thank you so much for your time, and if you like this video, drop a like or even subscribe. That really helps me out. And if you want to see another breakdown of another release, then click right over here.